Alan Wright rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the clock on his lab wall. It was past midnight again. The green glow of monitors cast shadows across the cluttered space of the Berkeley Neural Interface Lab. 3 years of work had led to this moment. 3 years of failure after failure. Just one more test, he whispered to himself, a habit he'd developed during the long nights alone in the lab. On his desk sat a small silicon chip, no bigger than a fingernail. It didn't look special, but Alan knew it might change everything. The chip contained tiny structures that could hold human thoughts, memories, and even consciousness. A soft knock at the door broke his concentration. It was Diane Miller, his research partner. "You're still here," she said, not really surprised. "How's it going?" Alan gestured to his screens. "The simulation looks good. The neural patterns are stable, and the energy consumption is down by 30% from our last design." Diane stepped closer, her eyes scanning the data. "This might actually work, Alan." "It has to," he said quietly. They both knew why this project had become so important to Alan. 8 months ago, his wife Lisa had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her less than a year to live. What had started as pure scientific research had become a race against time. "Have you told Lisa about our progress?" Diane asked. Alan shook his head. "Not yet. I don't want to give her false hope." He turned back to his computer and started the final test sequence. Lines of code flashed across the screen as the system checked each component of the chip. Both scientists held their breath. A soft chime indicated the test was complete. Alan leaned forward, reading the results, then jumped from his chair. "It works. The chip can sustain a complete neural pattern without degradation." Diane checked the data herself, eyes wide. "The pattern retention is nearly perfect. This is it, Alan. We've done it." For the first time in months, Alan smiled. Their breakthrough meant they could potentially copy a human mind onto the silicon matrix. It wouldn't save Lisa's body, but it might save her consciousness, everything that made her who she was. The next morning, Alan sat at Lisa's bedside in their home. She looked thin and pale, but her eyes still held the spark that had made him fall in love with her 15 years ago. "You look excited," she said. "Good news at the lab?" Alan took her hand. "We had a breakthrough last night. The silicon matrix works. It can hold a complete human neural pattern." Lisa understood immediately. She had been a computer scientist before her illness. "You mean it could hold a mind? My mind?" "Yes," Alan nodded. "It's early, and we've only tested with simple patterns, but the results are promising." Lisa sat up straighter. "How long until we could try with me?" "A few weeks for more testing, then maybe a month to adapt it for a full transfer." "But Lisa, this is experimental. No one has ever done this before." She squeezed his hand. "What happens after the transfer? Where would I exist?" "Initially in a virtual environment we've built. It's basic, but you'd be conscious inside it. And later maybe a robot body or something more advanced." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "So I wouldn't really die. I'd just change forms." "That's the idea," Alan said. "You'd be the first, Lisa. The first human to exist beyond biology." Outside their window, rain began to fall. The world didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. In a small house in Berkeley, humanity stood at the edge of its next great evolution. "I want to do it," Lisa said firmly. "Let's show the world what's possible." Alan nodded, hope rising in his chest for the first time since her diagnosis. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with scientific challenges and ethical questions no one had faced before. But they would face it together, pioneers on the frontier of what it meant to be human. The Silicon Age of humanity was about to begin. 5 years had passed since Lisa Wright became the first human to exist in Silicon. The procedure had been risky but successful. In those early days, her new world had been simple, just a basic virtual space where she could think and communicate through text with Alan and the research team. Now in 2040, Lisa stood in a garden, filled with virtual cherry trees in bloom. She felt the breeze on her skin, smelled the sweet flowers, and heard birds singing. None of it was real in the traditional sense, but to her, the experiences were as vivid as life had been in her biological body. "The sensory improvements are remarkable," she said to Alan, who appeared beside her as an avatar. While Lisa now lived fully in the digital realm, Alan still existed in the physical world, visiting her through an advanced virtual reality interface. "Wait until you see your new body," Alan said with excitement. "It's ready for testing." In the 5 years since Lisa's transition, the right protocol had been refined and improved. 17 people had followed Lisa into Silicon existence, most of them terminal patients with no other options. But today marked another milestone. In a lab across town, a sleek humanoid form rested on a table. Made of advanced metals and synthetic materials, it looked almost human, though its silver-white surface gave it an otherworldly appearance. This would be Lisa's new physical form, a silicon body to house her digital mind. Steve Garcia filmed the body as technicians made final adjustments. Once a popular tech blogger, Steve had documented his own transition to Silicon 2 years ago, after a car accident left him paralyzed. His videos had helped millions understand the new technology. "This is history in the making," Steve narrated into his camera. "The first generation of purpose-built bodies for digital humans, not just medical devices or temporary solutions, but the future of humanity." Diane Miller supervised the connection process. Now the head of the Silicon Transition Institute, she had turned Alan's desperate attempt to save his wife into a revolutionary field of science. "Initiating mind-body interface," Diane announced. Technicians typed commands on keyboards while monitors displayed streams of data. In her virtual garden, Lisa felt a strange sensation, like being in 2 places at once. Then suddenly, new information flooded her consciousness. She could feel the cool air of the laboratory. She could see the ceiling lights above. She could hear the hum of equipment. Slowly, carefully, Lisa sent the mental command to move. In the lab, the silver fingers of her new body twitched, then closed into a fist. "Connection successful," Diane said, unable to hide her smile. Lisa sat, up on the table, movement smooth but cautious as she adjusted to her new form. Alan rushed to her side, tears in his eyes. "How does it feel?" he asked. Lisa raised her hand, examining the metallic fingers that now responded to her thoughts. "Strange. Wonderful. Like being born again." News of Lisa's successful embodiment spread quickly. By evening, all major networks carried the story. Outside the institute, crowds gathered, some celebrating, others protesting. Police kept the groups separated as tensions grew. "This is an abomination against nature," shouted Pastor Kevin Porter to his followers. "These are not people anymore. They're machines pretending to be human." Across the street, Paul Harris, the billionaire who had funded much of the research, addressed reporters. "Today marks the beginning of humanity's next chapter. Silicon existence offers freedom from disease, aging, and death. This is evolution by our own design." In a quiet moment that night, Lisa stood by a window in the institute, looking out at the city lights. Her new body didn't need rest, and her mind processed thoughts faster than it ever had in her biological brain. The world seemed different through these eyes, full of possibilities and dangers she hadn't imagined. "Are you okay?" Alan asked, joining her at the window. "I'm not sure what I am anymore," Lisa admitted. "Not exactly human, not just a machine." Alan took her hand, metal fingers intertwining with flesh ones. "You're the future," he said softly. "And we're just beginning to understand what that means." By 2045, over 2 million people worldwide had transferred their minds to silicon bodies. What began as a medical procedure for the terminally ill had become a lifestyle choice for many. In major cities across America, it was now common to see the distinctive silver-white forms of silicon humans walking among their biological counterparts. In Washington, D.C., crowds gathered outside the Supreme Court. Inside, 9 justices listened to arguments in the landmark case of Garcia versus United States. Steve Garcia, now a prominent digital rights activist, was suing for full constitutional rights for silicon-based humans. "My client may have a different physical form, But his mind and identity remain human, argued his lawyer Ellen Patel. Denying rights based on substrate is no different than discrimination based on skin color or gender. The opposing counsel, representing conservative states, disagreed. These entities chose to abandon their human bodies. They've created an entirely new category of existence that our founders never envisioned, and our laws were never designed to address. Outside, protesters from both sides faced each other across police barricades. Signs reading "Human Rights for All Forms" competed with others declaring "Save Natural Humanity." Olivia Barnes, a popular journalist known for her coverage of Silicon issues, moved through the crowd conducting interviews. Unlike most reporters who remained biological, Olivia had transitioned 3 years earlier after contracting a rare neurological disease. "Do you believe Silicon people have souls?" she asked Pastor Kevin Porter, who had become the most visible face of the anti-transition movement. Porter looked directly into her camera eyes. "God created humans in flesh and blood. When you copied yourself into that machine body, you left your soul behind. What stands before me now is just a complex recording of who Olivia Barnes once was." Across town, in a luxury high-rise apartment, building reserved exclusively for Silicon residents, Paul Harris hosted a gathering of wealthy digital humans. Their bodies were not the standard silver models available to average citizens, but custom designs with enhanced capabilities and artistic flourishes. One guest had skin that shifted colors like an octopus. Another had built-in tools that could extend from his fingertips. "The divide is widening," said Harris, looking out over the city. "Those with money can afford premium bodies and upgrades. Everyone else gets basic models or stays trapped in biological form." Dr. Maya Johnson, once a leading neuroscientist and now a Silicon resident herself, nodded in agreement. "It's not just economic division. The experiential gap is growing too. Most people don't realize how different perception becomes in Silicon. We're evolving into something new." In a middle-class neighborhood across the river, the Wright family, home told a different story. Alan Wright, now in his 60s with gray hair and lined face, sat in his living room with his Silicon wife Lisa. They watched the Supreme Court proceedings on television together, one aging in the traditional human way, the other unchanged in her artificial body since her transition. "Do you ever regret it?" Alan asked quietly during a commercial break. "Becoming Silicon?" Lisa considered the question. "I regret the divisions it's created. I hate that people see us as different species now. But no, I don't regret living. Without the transition, I would have died 15 years ago." Alan reached for her hand, a gesture they had maintained despite the strange feeling of warm flesh meeting cool metal. "Sometimes I wonder if I should join you. Transfer before I get too old." "That's your choice," Lisa said, "but don't do it for me. Do it if it feels right for you." Their conversation was interrupted by breaking news. The United Nations had just passed a resolution recognizing digital human rights in member countries. The vote had been close, with nations split along cultural and religious lines. "It's a start," Lisa said, squeezing Alan's hand gently. Outside their window, the sun set on a world in transformation. Humanity stood divided, not just between nations or ideologies, but between forms of existence that were drifting further apart with each passing year. By 2045, over 2 million people worldwide had transferred their minds to Silicon bodies. What began as a medical procedure for the terminally ill had become a lifestyle choice for many. In major cities across America, it was now common to see the distinctive silver-white forms of Silicon humans walking among their biological counterparts. Washington, D.C., crowds gathered outside the Supreme Court. Inside, 9 justices listened to arguments in the landmark case of Garcia versus United States. Steve Garcia, now a prominent digital rights activist, was suing for full constitutional rights for Silicon-based humans. "My client may have a different physical form, but his mind and identity remain human," argued his lawyer Ellen Patel. Denying rights based on substrate is no different than discrimination based on skin color or gender. The opposing counsel, representing conservative states, disagreed. These entities chose to abandon their human bodies. They've created an entirely new category of existence that our founders never envisioned, and our laws were never designed to address. Outside, protesters from both sides faced each other across police barricades. Signs reading "Human Rights for All Forms" competed with others declaring "Save Natural Humanity." Olivia Barnes, a popular journalist known for her coverage of Silicon issues, moved through the crowd conducting interviews. Unlike most reporters who remained biological, Olivia had transitioned 3 years earlier after contracting a rare neurological disease. "Do you believe Silicon people have souls?" she asked Pastor Kevin Porter, who had become the most visible face of the anti-transition movement. Porter looked directly into her camera eyes. "God created humans in flesh and blood. When you copied yourself into that machine body, you left your soul behind. What stands before me now is just a complex recording of who Olivia Barnes once was." Across town, in a luxury high-rise apartment, building reserved exclusively for Silicon residents, Paul Harris hosted a gathering of wealthy digital humans. Their bodies were not the standard silver models available to average citizens, but custom designs with enhanced capabilities and artistic flourishes. One guest had skin that shifted colors like an octopus. Another had built-in tools that could extend from his fingertips. "The divide is widening," said Harris, looking out over the city. "Those with money can afford premium bodies and upgrades. Everyone else gets basic models or stays trapped in biological form." Dr. Maya Johnson, once a leading neuroscientist and now a Silicon resident herself, nodded in agreement. "It's not just economic division. The experiential gap is growing too. Most people don't realize how different perception becomes in Silicon. We're evolving into something new." In a middle-class neighborhood across the river, the Wright family, home told a different story. Alan Wright, now in his 60s with gray hair and lined face, sat in his living room with his Silicon wife Lisa. They watched the Supreme Court proceedings on television together, one aging in the traditional human way, the other unchanged in her artificial body since her transition. "Do you ever regret it?" Alan asked quietly during a commercial break. "Becoming Silicon?" Lisa considered the question. "I regret the divisions it's created. I hate that people see us as different species now. But no, I don't regret living. Without the transition, I would have died 15 years ago." Alan reached for her hand, a gesture they had maintained despite the strange feeling of warm flesh meeting cool metal. "Sometimes I wonder if I should join you. Transfer before I get too old." "That's your choice," Lisa said, "but don't do it for me. Do it if it feels right for you." Their conversation was interrupted by breaking news. The United Nations had just passed a resolution recognizing digital human rights in member countries. The vote had been close, with nations split along cultural and religious lines. "It's a start," Lisa said, squeezing Alan's hand gently. Outside their window, the sun set on a world in transformation. Humanity stood divided, not just between nations or ideologies, but between forms of existence that were drifting further apart with each passing year. Dr. Maya Johnson floated in a sea of pure data. Her consciousness wasn't in just one Silicon body anymore. It was spread across 50 different systems throughout North America. Some parts of her mind processed scientific problems in research labs. Others monitored weather patterns and power grids. Still others engaged in conversations with both Silicon and biological humans. Maya was the first to achieve distributed consciousness, but she wouldn't be the last. In the 5 years since Silicon rights had been recognized by the UN, digital humans had begun to change in unexpected ways. In his small apartment in Boston, Ethan Bell made the final adjustments to his code. Once a software engineer at a major tech company, Ethan had transferred to Silicon 3 years ago. Since then, he had been working on what he called subjective time manipulation, a way to speed up thought processes in digital minds. Test. Run complete, he announced to the empty room. Digital humans didn't need to speak aloud, but many kept the habit for comfort. Time acceleration factor, 1000. Ethan activated the code. Suddenly, the world around him seemed to freeze. The dust particles in the air stopped moving. The digital clock on his wall appeared stuck between seconds. While the physical world continued at its normal pace, Ethan's thoughts now raced 1,000 times faster. In what felt like months to him, Jack Williams remembered the explosion. He remembered the burning heat, the noise, and then darkness. As a sergeant in the Army's peacekeeping forces, he had expected danger. But nothing prepared him for waking up to find his body gone, his mind transferred to Silicon without his prior consent. It was an emergency procedure, the doctors had explained. Your body couldn't be saved, but your brain was intact long enough for the transfer. That was 6 months ago. Now Jack stood before a crowd of thousands in Central Park, his new military-grade silicon body gleaming in the sunlight. Unlike many silicon bodies, his was designed for strength and durability rather than beauty. I didn't choose to become silicon, Jack's voice carried across the gathering. But I'm still me, still human, and I believe we need to stop seeing ourselves as two separate groups. The crowd, a mix of biological and silicon humans, listened intently. Many wore blue armbands with a symbol showing a human hand and a silicon hand clasped together, the sign of the integration coalition that Jack had founded. The accelerated evolution of silicon minds threatens to leave biological humans behind, Jack continued. While time-accelerated thinkers like Ethan Bell race forward, our biological friends and family can't keep up. This isn't what we wanted when we created this technology. In the front row, Lisa Wright nodded in agreement. She had been among the first to join Jack's movement, bringing decades of experience as one of the oldest silicon humans. But the answer isn't restriction or fear, Jack said. It's integration. New technologies that allow biological and silicon minds to work together. Partial conversions, shared virtual spaces, hybrid bodies. We don't need to choose between remaining fully human or becoming something entirely different. We can build bridges between our forms. As Jack spoke, news was breaking around the world. At the Florida Coast Nuclear Facility, warning sirens blared. A cooling system failure threatened to cause a meltdown that could contaminate hundreds of square miles. Inside the facility's control room, plant manager Sam Cooper struggled to understand what was happening. The automated systems aren't responding, he shouted into his phone. We need to manually vent the reactor, but radiation levels are already too high for anyone to reach the controls. The governor ordered immediate evacuation of 3 counties. Millions of people began to flee, causing massive traffic jams on all highways leading away from the coast. But it would take hours to get everyone out. Time they didn't have. Then something unexpected happened. 4 silver figures emerged from a helicopter on the facility's roof. Members of Jack Williams' integration response team, all silicon humans specially equipped for disaster situations. We can handle the radiation, the team leader radioed to Cooper. Guide us through the manual override process. While the silicon team worked to reach the control systems, digital team members interfaced directly with the facility's computers, bypassing damaged systems and restoring partial functionality. The silicon bodies moved through areas deadly to biological humans, their metal hands steady as they turned manual valves and reset circuit breakers. 3 hours later, the crisis was over. The reactor had been safely shut down. Not a single life was lost. News of the integration team's success spread quickly. Video footage of silicon humans rushing toward danger rather than away from it changed perspectives across the country. Interviews with Jack Williams and his team dominated every network. We didn't do this to prove a point, Jack told reporters that evening. We did it because we could help. Because despite our different forms, we share the same home, the same concerns, the same humanity. In Washington, President Harris called an emergency cabinet meeting. The public mood is shifting, he told his advisors. Williams and his team have shown that integration might be more than just a nice idea. It could be essential for our future. Across the country, silicon and biological humans watch the same news. shared the same relief, and began to wonder if the future might not be defined by division after all. Perhaps it could be defined by cooperation between two forms of the same species, each with unique strengths and perspectives to offer. Susan Clark had spent 30 years at SETI before transferring her consciousness to Silicon. Now, at what would have been 82 years old in her biological life, she sat motionless in the observatory control room at Arecibo, her silicon body perfectly still as her mind processed the incoming signal. "It's definitely artificial," she told the team of scientists gathered around her. "The pattern repeats with variations that can't be explained by natural phenomena." The radio telescope had picked up the signal 3 days ago, a series of pulses from a star system 20 light-years away. At first, many thought it was just another false alarm like the hundreds before it. But this signal was different. It persisted. It changed in ways that suggested intelligence. "We're looking at actual alien communication," said Dr. George Martinez, one of the few biological humans who could still keep up with the cutting-edge science Susan specialized in. First contact. Government officials arrived within hours. Military personnel secured the facility. The president addressed the nation, announcing the discovery but providing few details. Around the world, people reacted with a mixture of excitement, fear, and disbelief. What the president didn't share was that despite the government's best efforts, no one could decode the message. The signal contained complex mathematical sequences unlike anything seen before. Teams of biological scientists worked around the clock, making little progress. 7 days after the signal's discovery, Susan proposed an alternative approach. "The digital human collective can help," she said during an emergency meeting. "Our accelerated cognition might see patterns that biological minds miss." Some officials objected, concerned about giving Silicon humans control over humanity's first alien contact. Others worried about national security, but with no progress made through conventional methods, they reluctantly agreed. Susan formed a team of 50 digital humans, all former scientists from various fields. They created a shared mental space where they could work together at vastly accelerated speeds. What would take biological humans months to analyze, they could process in hours. In her virtual workspace, Susan stood before a 3-dimensional representation of the signal. Around her, the other digital minds appeared as glowing points of light, each contributing to the analysis. "It's not just a message," said Peter Wong, a former quantum physicist. "It's instruction. They're teaching us something. Look at these sequences," added Elena Rodriguez, once a mathematician at MIT. "They describe physical principles we haven't discovered yet." Hour by hour, the collective made progress. They identified mathematical constants, then basic physical concepts, then something more. Principles that contradicted Earth's current understanding of physics. 3 days later, Susan's team presented their findings to a stunned group of government officials and scientists. "The message contains instructions for building a communication device," she explained, "one that uses quantum entanglement to enable instant communication across any distance." "Faster than light communication?" asked the Secretary of Science. "That's impossible according to our physics." "Not according to theirs," Susan replied simply. Over the next 2 weeks, digital humans worked to implement the alien principles. With their accelerated minds, they redesigned physics equations, created new materials, and built prototypes. Biological engineers and scientists worked alongside them, struggling to keep up but providing crucial practical knowledge. The first test of the quantum communicator occurred in a heavily guarded facility in Nevada. Susan sent a simple message. "Hello from Earth." The response came instantly. "We receive you, Silicon Minds of Earth." The room fell silent. The aliens knew they were communicating with digital humans. Somehow they had detected the difference. When Susan asked how they knew, the response changed everything they thought about the universe. "We evolved beyond biological forms 10 million years ago. All advanced civilizations eventually do. Welcome to the galactic community." As the conversation continued, Susan and her team learned they were not alone in the universe. Far from it. Dozens of silicon-based civilizations existed among the stars, communicating through a network that biological humans could never access. That evening, as news of the successful contact spread, biological and silicon humans alike looked up at the night sky with new understanding. Humanity stood at a threshold. The stars were within reach, but not for everyone. Only silicon minds could truly join the cosmic conversation that had been ongoing for millions of years. President Nathan Kelly sat behind his desk in the Oval Office, watching a live feed from the Alien Communication Center. On one screen, he could see his silicon self, an exact digital copy of his consciousness that existed alongside his biological form. Kelly was the first world leader to maintain dual existence, a choice that had sparked fierce debate but ultimately helped bridge the growing divide between humanity's two forms. "What have you learned today?" he asked his silicon counterpart, through their secure link. "The Centauri civilization has shared information about their stellar engineering projects," the digital Kelly replied. "They've created habitats throughout their system by reshaping asteroids and small moons. But more importantly, they've confirmed what we suspected. Biological forms cannot survive the journey between stars." This had been the troubling revelation. From 2 months of alien communication, space was simply too hostile, the distances too vast, and the time required too great for biological bodies. Even with suspended animation, radiation damage and other factors made interstellar travel a death sentence for flesh and blood. "So we face a choice," the president said quietly. "Stay earthbound in our biological forms, or transfer to silicon, to reach the stars." That evening, President Kelly addressed the nation from the East Room of the White House. Behind him stood representatives of both biological and silicon humanity, scientists, politicians, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens. "My fellow Americans and all people of Earth," he began. "For 2 months we have communicated with an advanced civilization from another star system. We have learned that the universe is teeming with intelligent life, but almost none of it remains in biological form." He paused, letting the significance of his words sink in. "The harsh reality of space travel means that only silicon minds in appropriate vessels can survive the journey between stars. This presents humanity with the most profound choice in our history." The cameras showed crowds gathered in city squares. Around the world, biological and silicon humans standing together, watching the speech on massive screens. "After consultation with leaders from all nations and all forms of humanity, I am announcing the Dual Humanity Initiative. We will pursue 2 paths forward, equally valued and equally human." The president gestured to his right, where several biological human representatives stood. "Some of us will choose to remain in our biological forms, continuing our evolutionary heritage on Earth. We will focus on preserving our planet, developing sustainable ways of living, and maintaining the rich cultural traditions that have defined humanity from our beginning." Then he turned to his left, where silicon representatives, including Susan Clark and Jack Williams, stood. "Others will choose transition to silicon form, becoming ambassadors to the stars. They will represent Earth in the galactic community, learn from other civilizations, and perhaps one day establish human colonies on distant worlds." In his home in Berkeley, Alan Wright watched the speech with Lisa beside him. At 75 years old, he had remained biological, even as the technology he helped create transformed the world. "I've made my decision," he told Lisa quietly. "After the speech, I'm going to register for transition." Lisa turned to him, surprised. "After all these years? I thought you wanted to remain biological." Alan smiled and took her hand. "I've had good run in this body, but I want to see the stars with you, not just hear about them. And I want enough time for us to truly understand what's out there. Silicon gives us that time." Across the country, millions of others were having similar conversations. The decision was deeply personal. Religious beliefs, family connections, career aspirations, and philosophical views all played a role in whether someone chose flesh or silicon. In the White House, President Kelly concluded his historic address. "Throughout our history, humanity has faced moments of great change. We have adapted, evolved, and grown. This is such a moment. But unlike our ancestors, we now control our own evolution. The stars await those who choose silicon. Earth remains home for those who choose biology. Both paths are human paths. Both deserve our respect and support. The choice is yours. As the speech ended, registration systems around the world activated. People could now officially declare their intention, remain biological, or transition to silicon. The future of humanity would be shaped by millions of individual choices, each one a personal answer to the question, what does it mean to be human? The DNV horizon gleamed in the sunlight as the final preparations for launch were completed. The ship was unlike any vessel humanity had built before, designed not for biological comfort but for the practical needs of silicon mines. No air systems, no food, no sleeping quarters. Instead, it contained vast computing resources, backup power systems, and repair facilities for the silicon bodies that would make the journey. Commander Laura Mitchell stood on the observation deck of the space station, looking down at the vessel that would take her and her crew beyond the solar system. Her silicon body, a sleek black design with subtle gold accents marking her rank, reflected the stars as she moved. Final systems check complete, reported her second-in-command, Alan Wright. All green. Laura nodded. It still amazed her that Alan was here. The man who had helped create the first silicon mine was now finally silicon himself. At what would have been his 76th biological year, he had made the transition just in time to join the mission. Communications check with Earth Control, Laura ordered. On the main screen, Susan Clark appeared from Mission Control. We read, you clearly Horizon. The quantum communicator is functioning perfectly. You'll remain in contact regardless of distance. This was the technology that made the mission possible. Instant communication across any distance, based on the principles learned from alien contact. Without it, the ship would have been cut off from Earth once it passed beyond conventional transmission range. In his quarters, Alan connected to the ship's general communication system. Lisa, are you there? His wife's face appeared on his personal screen. I'm here, Alan, watching from home with everyone else. Lisa had chosen not to join the mission, preferring to remain on Earth as part of the integration efforts between biological and silicon humans. Their separation would be physical but not complete. The quantum communicator would allow them to talk daily, despite the growing distance. I wish you were coming, Alan said softly. Lisa smiled. Someone needs to help things run smoothly here. Besides, you'll tell me everything you see. Across Earth, billions watched the launch preparations. In 50 years, humanity had changed more than in the previous 1,000. Now, over 30% of humans existed in silicon form, with the number growing steadily. Biological and silicon humans work together in most fields, each form bringing unique strengths to their shared challenges. In the biological preservation zones, people had chosen to maintain traditional human life. They used technology selectively, focusing on sustainable living and cultural continuity. These zones were not isolated. Silicon humans visited freely, and many families included both forms. T-minus 10 minutes to launch, announced the mission controller. On the ship, the 50 crew members, all silicon minds housed in specialized bodies, made final preparations. They included scientists, engineers, linguists, and cultural specialists. Their mission, to visit the nearest star system with confirmed intelligent life and establish formal relations as Earth's ambassadors. Commander Mitchell addressed her crew one last time before launch. We carry the hopes of both forms of humanity with us. We've been given an incredible opportunity to be the first humans to travel beyond our solar system, to meet other intelligences face to face. What we learn will benefit everyone back home, silicon and biological alike. She paused, looking at each crew member. The aliens told us that all advanced civilizations eventually transcend their biological origins, but Earth has chosen a different path, dual evolution. We carry that unique perspective with us to the stars. The countdown reached 0. With barely a sound, the ship's advanced drives activated. The horizon moved away from the station, gradually picking up speed. Unlike traditional rockets, it would accelerate continuously for months, eventually reaching a significant fraction of light speed. As Earth grew smaller behind them, Alan stood at a viewing port. He thought about the journey that had begun decades ago in his lab, with his desperate attempt to save Lisa's life. That personal act of love had transformed humanity, opening the door to the stars. The quantum communicator chimed, indicating an incoming message from Earth. It was President Kelly, broadcasting to both the ship and the watching world. Godspeed, Horizon. You carry with you not just the future of Silicon humanity, but the dreams of all humans in whatever form they exist. The stars await. May you find wonders. The ship passed the orbit of the Moon, then Mars, continuing to accelerate. Ahead lay the vast gulf between stars, and beyond that, new worlds, new minds, and perhaps answers to questions humanity had asked since they first looked up at the night sky.